Let's dive in. We're tackling something super interesting today, genetic variations in us, Homo sapiens. I've got this really cool research you sent over, and I can't wait to break it all down. With your help, of course, we're going to cover it all, what genetic variation even is, how it's changed us over time, and get this, how it still affects everything from, well, our health to, believe it or not, our ancestry.
Yeah, it's really amazing, like, what we can learn from these tiny little differences in our DNA, right? It really is like we're cracking a code, a hidden code about ourselves and, like, all of humanity.
Okay, so, gotta start with the basics, right? What is genetic variation, and why should we even care?
Okay, so think of it like this. The human genome, that's all our DNA, right? It's like this massive instruction manual. It's for building a human. But here's the thing. Not everyone has the exact same instructions. You know what I mean? There are little like variations, almost like typos. They're in different people's genetic code. And well, these variations, they're what makes each of us unique. They influence everything from how we look to, how likely we are to get certain diseases.
So it's like we all have the same basic blueprint, but with like little tweaks and edits.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, okay, we all have the same cookbook, right? But, and here's the kicker, everyone uses kind of different ingredients or cooks for a different amount of time, And even those little changes, they can lead to, well, pretty big differences in how the final dish turns out.
That's a really good way to put it. Now, how do these variations even happen? Like, is it random? Is there a reason?
Well, that's where evolution comes in. Over millions of years, right? The genetic variations that helped our ancestors, survive and make babies, those were more likely to be passed down. That whole process, that's what we call natural selection.
Survival of the fittest. So,
yeah.
Like the variations that gave them an advantage, those are the ones that stuck around, right?
Exactly. Think about polar bears, right? Classic example. The ones with thicker fur, whiter fur, they blended in better, right? In the snow. They were more likely to survive, the Arctic. And over time, the genes for that thicker, whiter fur, they became more common, in the polar bear population. Gave them a real edge.
Makes sense. So this same process, it's been shaping, well, human genetics for like forever, right?
Absolutely. For a really, really long time. Take lactose tolerance. In populations that, historically have been big on dairy farming, being able to digest lactose, that was a huge advantage nutritionally. So as a result, the gene for lactose tolerance, it became, well, more common in those groups.
That's so cool. So where does human migration fit into all of this?
Okay, so as humans migrated out of Africa, spread across the globe, they hit all these new environments, faced new challenges, different climates, different food, diseases. All of that put pressure, selective pressure, on their genes, and it led to, well, different patterns of variation in different populations.
So basically, as humans adapted, to different parts of the world, their genes, like, evolved too, to reflect those adaptations.
Precisely. And that's why we see some traits that are more common in some populations than others, like sickle cell trait. It can be harmful in some cases, but get this, it protects against malaria. So it's more common in areas where malaria is a big problem.
Okay, so we've been talking about variations, within populations, but what about differences between them? That's where things get a little tricky, right?
Yeah, that's where the whole idea of race comes in. And to be honest, from a purely genetic standpoint, race as like these clear-cut categories, it doesn't really hold up.
So you're saying race is more of a social thing than a genetic reality?
Exactly. Most genetic variation, it actually exists within populations, not between them. You could have two people, right, from the same village in Africa who are, genetically speaking, more different from each other than either one is from someone in Europe.
Wow, that really changes how we usually think about race.
Yeah, it does. The amount of genetic material that determines things like skin color or hair texture, it's tiny compared to the vast majority of our DNA, which we all share. We're all human.
Okay, so if race isn't a good indicator of genetic difference, then what is?
Geographical distance. Generally speaking, the further apart two populations are geographically, the more likely it is they'll have developed different genetic variations over time.
Like how some genetic conditions are more common in some areas than others.
Exactly. So, for example, cystic fibrosis is more common in people of European descent, while sickle cell anemia, that's more common in people of African descent. And that's because, well, those variations, they actually provided a survival advantage in those specific locations, way back in history.
That brings up a really interesting question. If our genes are so tied to, our geography and our evolutionary history, then, well, what does that even mean for things like national identity and cultural belonging? I mean,
Yeah.
those feel very real to people, right?
It definitely adds a layer of complexity. It challenges us to think, beyond simple categories and to see that human diversity is, well, nuanced and interconnected. We're all part of the same human story, but our chapters, they've unfolded in different parts of the world, and that's led to, well, some amazing variations in our genetic tapestry.
That's a really good point. So we've established that these tiny little genetic variations, they can have a big impact on how we look and our health. But what about our mental traits? Can our genes affect things like, intelligence, behavior, and personality?
That's a question that has fascinated scientists for a long time. And while it's a complex area and, a bit controversial sometimes, there's more and more evidence that our genes, they do have a role in shaping our mental landscape, so to speak.
Wait, are you saying our genes determine if we're like better at math or more creative?
It's not that simple. It's not like one gene equals one trait, It's more like, okay, our genes, they lay out a blueprint. And then the environment, that's our upbringing, our experiences, our choices, all that stuff that influences how that blueprint actually plays out.
So it's both, right? Nature and nurture working together.
Exactly. Think about intelligence. Studies show that genes, they do play a role in cognitive abilities, but a good nurturing environment, that can have a huge impact on how those abilities develop.
So a child who's genetically predisposed to be really smart, they might not reach their full potential if they don't get the right opportunities and support.
That's right. And on the other hand, a child who doesn't have that genetic predisposition, they can still thrive and do amazing things with the right environment and encouragement. It really shows us that our genes, they don't determine our destiny.
This whole nature versus nurture debate, it's super interesting. But can we get even more specific? What about like personality traits? Do our genes influence if we're, say, introverted or extroverted?
There's evidence that they do. Twin studies, they've been really helpful in figuring this out. Identical twins, right? They share 100% of their genes. They're more likely to have similar personality traits than fraternal twins who share about 50% of their genes.
So if identical twins are more alike in certain personality traits than fraternal twins, that kind of points to genes having an influence, right?
Exactly. And this is important, identical twins, even though they have the same genes, they don't always have identical personalities. Their unique experiences and environmental influences, those still matter.
So it's like our genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger.
I like that. That's a great analogy. It shows how, understanding your genetic predispositions, it doesn't mean your life is set in stone. We have the power to make choices, right? And shape our own lives, even within the framework that our genes give us.
This is also fascinating. But let's shift gears for a sec. Let's talk about health. We mentioned how genetic variations, they can affect our chances of getting certain diseases. But how can this knowledge actually help us in a practical way?
That's where personalized medicine comes in. It has a lot of potential. By understanding someone's genetic risks, we can tailor preventative measures, screening programs, and even treatment strategies so they work better for them.
So instead of like a one-size-fits-all approach, we're moving towards healthcare that's like customized, right, to each person's genetic makeup.
Exactly. Imagine like in the future, your doctor can analyze your genes and say, okay, so you have a slightly higher risk of heart disease, so let's focus on lifestyle changes and preventative stuff to keep you healthy.
That's incredible. But what about access? Will everyone be able to afford this kind of personalized health care?
That's a really important question, and it shows how important it is to make sure that everyone has equal access to these advancements. As genetic technologies get more advanced and more affordable, we got to make sure that that everyone benefits, not just a select few.
It sounds like we're heading into a future where knowing your genes, it's like having this superpower, but with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Absolutely. We got to think about the ethical stuff too, like, how genetic information could be misused. Imagine, someone gets denied a job or insurance because of their genetic predispositions. That's a dangerous path, We don't want to go there.
That's actually pretty scary.
Yeah.
So how do we use this power, the power of genetic knowledge for good and at the same time protect against misuse?
It's going to take a multi-pronged approach. Strong regulations, ethical guidelines for researchers and doctors and public education. We got to increase understanding and awareness about all this.
This whole discussion about personalized medicine and genetic testing, it makes me think about how popular ancestry testing is. People are like so into tracing their roots these days.
It is fascinating how those little, those tiny variations in our DNA, they can tell us so much about our heritage. By comparing DNA markers, we can trace, family lines, migrations, even identify people from the past.
Like how they used DNA testing to identify Richard III, right? That's history coming to life through genetics.
Exactly. And it's not just about, being curious about history. Ancestry testing, it can reveal health information too and predispositions to certain diseases. It links our past to our present well-being.
This has been an incredible journey so far, and I feel like I've already learned so much about myself, about humanity, and the incredible potential and the potential challenges of this whole genetic knowledge thing. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I have one last question. What's next? What are some of the most exciting things and the ethical dilemmas we're facing in the future of genetic research?
Well, things like CRISPR technology, they've given us the ability to edit genes. That opens up the possibility of curing genetic disorders or even, enhancing human capabilities.
Oh.
It's both exhilarating and a bit terrifying, to be honest.
Exhilarating because we might, be able to get rid of diseases that have been around for centuries, but terrifying because, well, we could be messing with the very fabric of life.
That's the dilemma. And it's not just about the science itself. It's about the ethical, societal, and philosophical implications.
It sounds like we've got a lot more to talk about. Looks like we've got a lot more ground to cover in the next part of our deep dive.
Oh yeah, definitely. We've barely scratched the surface. Stay tuned because things are about to get even more interesting. We left off talking about gene editing and CRISPR, right? What makes CRISPR so groundbreaking is its precision. It's like, imagine having these microscopic scissors and you can target and change like very specific genes.
So we're not just, identifying genes anymore. We can actually change them. That's incredible. But kind of scary too, right?
It is. Think about the potential, right, to cure genetic disorders. Things like cystic fibrosis, Huntington's disease, sickle cell anemia. These are diseases that have caused, so much suffering for generations. CRISPR, it gives us this hope, maybe we can wipe them out completely.
That would be huge, especially for families who have been affected by those diseases. But we also talked about, the potential downsides, like the ethical stuff, right? When it comes to gene editing.
Right. CRISPR, it's powerful, but that comes with a big responsibility. We gotta think about the potential consequences of changing the human germline. Those changes, they would be passed down, to future generations, and we don't really know what the long-term effects might be.
It's almost like we're opening Pandora's box. Right, we could unleash something that we can't control.
That's a valid concern, yeah. And then there's the whole debate about using CRISPR for enhancement, not just for therapy.
Sure.
Could we use it to create like designer babies?
Yeah.
Babies with specific traits like increased intelligence or athletic ability. Where do we draw the line?
That brings up so many questions. Ethical questions, societal questions, like would those enhancements be available to everyone? Or would they create, a whole new kind of inequality? Would we even recognize ourselves as human if we start, messing with our basic biology?
These are the questions we need to be, really grappling with as a society. We need to have these open and honest conversations about, the good and the bad, the potential benefits and risks of these technologies, and then come up with some ethical guidelines for how to use them.
This makes me think about something you said earlier about race being more of a social construct than a genetic reality. if our genes are so diverse and individual, how does that affect how we understand things like social groups and cultural identities?
It's complicated. It's this interplay. While genetics doesn't really support the idea of race as like these separate biological categories, we can't just ignore the social and cultural parts of race. People's experiences, their opportunities, they've been shaped by how societies have historically defined and treated different racial groups.
So even if race doesn't have a strong basis in genetics, it still has a real impact on people's lives. So,
Absolutely. It reminds us that even though, science can give us valuable insights, we also got to consider the social and historical context. We got to look beyond those simple categories and recognize that human identity is nuanced and multifaceted.
it's like we're always trying to reconcile, right, the biological realities of being human with the social realities of how we've organized ourselves, over time.
Exactly. And as we learn more about genetics, as our understanding evolves, it forces us to rethink our old assumptions and to embrace the complexity of human diversity.
This deep dive it's been really eye-opening, to say the least. We've covered so much, from the basics of genetic variation to the potential future of gene editing, and we've come across some really profound ethical and societal questions that we as humans, we need to address.
It really shows you the power of scientific inquiry and how important it is to engage in these thoughtful discussions about what these new discoveries mean.
Before we move on to our final part, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, the whole interplay between genes and environment. We talked about how that plays out in things like intelligence and personality. But what about on a bigger scale? How does it affect populations, over time?
That's a really fascinating area of study. For example, think about the impact of migration and environmental changes on genetic variation. When populations migrate, right, to new environments, they face new selective pressures in their genes. They adapt, over time.
So the environment can actually drive genetic changes in populations.
Exactly. It's a dynamic process. Think about how lactose tolerance developed in some populations. As dairy farming spread, the ability to digest lactose, that became a huge advantage, and that led to changes in the genetic makeup of those populations.
It's like this constant dance, right, between our genes and the world around us, each one shaping the other, over generations.
I like that. That's a beautiful way to put it. And this dance, it's been going on for millions of years, and it's led to the incredible diversity that we see in humans today.
This brings us back to the idea that we're all connected, right? Not just by our shared ancestry, but also by this constant interplay between our genes and our environment.
It's a powerful reminder of the intricate web of life and our place in it. And as we learn more about our DNA, as we dig deeper into its secrets, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, our history, and how interconnected we are as a species.
This has been an amazing exploration so far, and I'm excited to see where our final part takes us. We've really been on this amazing journey.
Yeah.
Exploring genetic variation and all that. We've seen how those little differences in our DNA, they shape who we are, where we come from, and even what might be in store for us in the future.
And we've really only just dipped our toes in the water. Genetics, it's a field that's moving so fast with new discoveries all the time. It's an exciting time to be alive, that's for sure, but it's also a time to really step back and think about things.
Yeah, I agree. We've touched on some pretty heavy stuff, ethical and societal issues.
Yeah.
As we figure out more and more about our genes, we got to be careful about the impact, right? Both for individuals and for society as a whole.
One of the biggest challenges, I think, is making sure that these advancements, they benefit everyone.
Yeah.
Fairly. Personalized medicine, it's a good example. It has the potential to completely change healthcare, but we got to make sure that everyone can access it, not just a select few.
Right. We don't want a world where healthcare is even more divided by how much money you have, where people who can afford genetic testing and personalized treatments have this huge advantage over those who can't.
Exactly. We need to think about the ethical side of things,
Mhm.
and create policies that promote fairness and justice. And it's not just about, getting healthcare. It's about making sure that genetic information is used responsibly, ethically in every part of life.
Yeah, yeah. We talked before about the possibility of genetic discrimination.
Yeah.
Imagine someone gets denied a job,
Yeah.
or can't get insurance because of their genes. That's a scary
And
thought.
it is,
Yeah,
and it's a real possibility. If we don't put some strong safeguards in place, we
yeah.
need clear rules, regulations that stop people from misusing genetic information and protect individuals from discrimination.
It feels like we're at this crossroads, right? With these incredible opportunities on one hand, and then these potential pitfalls on the other. How do we how do we navigate all this? How do we make sure that all these advancements in genetics are used for good?
It's gonna take a lot of different things. We need scientists to keep doing research,
Hmm.
to keep learning more about genetics and what it all means. We need strong ethical frameworks to guide how these technologies are developed and used. And we need to talk about it, openly and honestly. As a society, everyone needs a voice in shaping our genetic future.
That makes a lot of sense. Education and awareness, they're key. We got to make informed decisions about all this complex stuff. We got to move beyond those simple stories, and really embrace the nuance and the many sides of genetics.
Absolutely. And we have to remember that what we know about genetics, it's always changing. What we
Right.
know today might be different tomorrow. So we got to be open to new information, new ways of looking at things.
This whole deep dive it's been a real journey of discovery. Not just about genetics, but about ourselves and where we fit in the world. We've seen how these tiny little variations in our DNA, they connect us to our past, they shape our present, and they even give us a glimpse into the future.
It's a reminder that we're all part of something bigger, right? A story that's been unfolding, for generations across continents. We're all connected by those threads of shared ancestry and that intricate dance between our genes and the world around us.
This whole exploration it's been fascinating, and it's really made me think. I feel like I have a much better understanding now of how complex life is,
Mhm.
and how important it is to approach these kinds of things with curiosity, with humility, and with a commitment to doing what's right.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And for anyone who, wants to dig even deeper into this fascinating world, we highly recommend checking out the book Genetic Variations in Homo Sapiens. You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. It's a really great comprehensive look at all the different aspects of human genetic diversity.
Well, until our next deep dive, keep those minds curious, and keep those questions coming. The world of genetics, it's full of wonders just waiting to be discovered.